News anchors aired JD's words again and again. Some couldn't hold it together. One veteran reporter, voice cracking on air, said, "I've covered politics for 22 years, and I've never seen anything so unfiltered, so fearless." In living rooms from Kansas to Queens, people replayed the moment in stunned silence. Grandparents held each other. Factory workers stopped mid-shift. A single mom in Detroit who hadn't voted in 10 years turned to her teenage son and whispered, "He made me believe again." But in D.C., J.D. Vance wasn't celebrating. He sat quietly in a small West Wing office, a thick legal binder balanced on his knees. Pages of leaked Senate finances open like a wound. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury. They didn't just take money, he murmured to his aide. They stole hope. And in that moment, J.D. didn't plan a press victory. He made a vow. This wasn't just political war. This was a mission to rip out the rot. Down the hall, Chuck Schumer hadn't spoken in hours. His curtains were drawn. His office phones rang nonstop. No one answered. Outside, reporters circled like sharks, desperate for a quote, a denial, anything. But nothing came. Inside, one aide pleaded, "Sir, we need to respond. Say something." But Schumer just stared out the window at a city that no longer bowed to him. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance walked slowly back into the West Wing briefing room. Not to speak, to listen. As he passed a janitor, the man glanced up and whispered, "Thank you for saying what none of them would." J.D. nodded quietly. Then silence fell. A new DOJ report had just dropped, confirming 7 active investigations tied directly to Schumer's leadership. The room didn't whisper in party lines anymore. The tone had changed. One CNN anchor, visibly shaken, summed it up. "You don't have to like Trump or Vance, but today, truth mattered more than politics." That night, J.D. slipped home to check on his kids, but inside he found his father-in-law sitting alone in the dark, phone in hand, the press conference playing again. "I was wrong about you," the older man said softly. J.D. froze. He'd waited years to hear that. "I thought you were just another ambitious politician. But when you talked about the laid-off workers, the ones no one fights for, I remembered losing my job, watching my wife cry. You spoke for us." A tear slid down J.D.'s cheek. The two men embraced. "Thank you, son. I'll never forget what you did." Outside, every glowing screen across America replayed the moment. J.D. Vance, voice raw, eyes burning, calling out corruption in the most sacred halls of power. And for once, the country didn't feel divided. It felt seen. By morning, the internet was on fire. J.D. Vance's speech flooded every platform. Hashtags like "Vance for the People" and "The Truth Over Politics" trended in every state. Even late-night hosts, normally quick to roast Trump's administration, fell silent. Some admitted, "We can't joke this away." In churches, congregations replayed the video. In cities, workers watched the clip on break-room TVs. In towns long forgotten, people gathered in fire halls just to cry together. Because for once, it wasn't about parties. It was about truth. Then the protests began. Not against Trump, but against Senate corruption. Signs reading "Schumer must go" and "We want justice" filled the streets outside Capitol Hill. J.D. watched it unfold from a monitor. He didn't smile. "They've waited their whole lives for someone to speak up," he whispered. His aide replied, "You did." But J.D. shook his head. "No, they did. I just echoed them." That same day, something unthinkable happened. Major networks that once shielded the establishment released deep-dive exposés on Schumer's finances. Documentaries were greenlit. Editorial boards reversed stances. A primetime host said it plainly. "We can't dismiss what J.D. Vance exposed. The paper trail is real, and the country deserves answers. Schumer's office finally broke its silence, calling JD's remarks partisan smears. But it was too late. Across the aisle, lawmakers distanced themselves. Online, citizens demanded resignations. Schumer's own party allies whispered words like indefensible and damning. Inside a secure White House room, JD and President Trump reviewed evidence. Trump looked up and grinned. "Kid, I knew you had guts, but this is history." JD didn't grin back. "We can't stop now, because this wasn't about one man anymore. It was about generations of betrayal. It was about change." That evening, a town hall in Ohio overflowed. Veterans, factory workers, mothers holding photos of lost jobs or lost loved ones stood in line to speak. One elderly woman took the mic. "My husband worked 40 years in a steel mill. When they shipped our jobs overseas, nobody cared. Until last night." "You cared." JD stepped down from the stage and held her hand. "I didn't speak for you, ma'am. I spoke because of you." The room erupted in tears and applause, and across the country, people didn't see a vice president. They saw a fighter, a voice, a servant. Back in D.C., the quake continued. Staffers resigned. Whistleblowers stepped forward. The Senate Ethics Committee was overwhelmed. Meanwhile, JD was drafting a letter, a formal request to the DOJ for a full special counsel investigation, not just into Schumer, but into every major contract issued under the Biden administration. His advisors warned him, "This could end your career." He answered, "Then it'll be worth it, because corruption doesn't end with exposure. It ends with accountability." The next day, the White House released JD's letter, addressed to the DOJ and the American people. Attached, financial records, timelines, testimony. The opening line read, "If the law cannot touch the powerful, we have failed the people who trusted us." The letter went viral. College classrooms dissected it. Retired judges called it unprecedented courage. Even Schumer's loyalists went silent. JD didn't bask in it. He sat in a West Wing war room preparing for what came next. Smears, lawsuits, threats. But the people had his back. A video from a shelter in Chicago went viral. An old veteran held up a sign. "Thank you, JD. You remembered us." Later that day, Trump called him into the Oval Office. Outside, protesters gathered, but not in anger, in hope. "You did something rare," Trump said. "You walked into the fire, knowing it might burn everything." JD looked at him. "If I didn't, then what kind of country are we leaving behind?" Trump nodded. "The fire's here now." JD glanced at the evidence folder. "Good. I was born for this." That same hour, Chuck Schumer slipped out a back exit under federal escort. His financials were under audit. Shell companies had been exposed. It wasn't partisan anymore. It was justice. In private, JD met with senators from both parties, some longtime rivals. "I never thought I'd say this," one murmured, "but I trust you." JD looked them in the eye. "Then let's fix this. Not for me. Not even for Trump. But for every forgotten family they left behind." That night, millions rewatched his speech, again. Not because it was viral, because it was real. The next morning, protesters filled the Senate steps. Veterans, teachers, single moms, teens waving flags, and at 4:37 p.m., the news broke. Chuck. Schumer resigns from the United States Senate. His statement was bitter, blamed the media climate, offered no apology, but no one listened. Across the country, people wept. Church bells rang. Fire stations flew flags. From Harlem to Tulsa, people felt something they hadn't felt in years: justice. In the West Wing, JD stood holding the resignation letter. He didn't cheer. He bowed his head. "This wasn't revenge," he whispered. "It was redemption." Trump walked in, hand on JD's shoulder. You gave them their country back. JD replied, now we make it worthy of them. That night, a handwritten letter arrived. No return address, just a small flag stitched on the corner. Inside, my son died believing his country wouldn't forget him. For years, I thought maybe it had, until I heard you speak. You didn't defend a party. You defended a promise. For the first time in years, I felt seen. JD folded the letter carefully, placed it in his pocket. He would carry it, always. Across America, schools held assemblies, churches lit candles, small towns raised flags, not for a politician, for truth. Because J.D. Vance had reminded America what leadership should look like, not ego, service. On the Capitol steps, he spoke one last time. No notes, no script, just heart. I didn't come to Washington to win votes. I came here because I was tired of watching families suffer while politicians lived like royalty. He held up Schumer's resignation. This is for every soldier who came home to silence, every worker told to shut up, every parent who skipped dinner so their kids could eat. Pause. And if they come after me for this, so be it. The only thing worse than losing a job in politics is losing your soul by staying silent. A child clapped, a veteran saluted, and the country rose to its feet. The next morning, J.D. walked through the White House, sleeves rolled, folder in hand. He passed young staffers, tearful, hopeful. Ready to work? He asked. They nodded. Good, he smiled, because we've got a country to rebuild. And across the land, flags flew, not for a party, but for the truth. And this time, it was louder than the lies. During a fiery press conference, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer attempted to discredit President Trump's recent economic accomplishments. But what happened next turned a routine media event into a historic national reckoning. Just moments after Schumer mocked Trump's numbers, Vice President J.D. Vance broke protocol, walked to the podium, and delivered a raw, fact-loaded counterattack that sent shockwaves across the country. The press room was shoulder to shoulder, red lights, blinking live on every network camera. Schumer adjusted his tie, flashed a smug smile, and said, I know President Trump is proud of his so-called economic numbers. But let's be clear, it's a mirage, a sugar high with no substance. Gasps murmured through the gallery. But Schumer wasn't finished. Donald Trump thinks he's accomplished something as the 47th president. He hasn't. It's time he resigns or gets ready to be removed. In the front row, Vice President Vance clenched his jaw. He hadn't planned to speak. But this wasn't just politics anymore. It was personal. And when Schumer stepped back from the podium, Vance stood up. The room froze. Vance approached the microphone with calm determination. I wasn't scheduled to speak today, he began, but I can't sit by while lies poison this country. He turned to Schumer. You say the economy is a mirage? No. A mirage is a man who's spent 50 years in Washington claiming to fight for the people while robbing them blind. Gasps. Silence. Vance leaned in, his voice calm but cutting. You were majority leader while our border collapsed. Fentanyl drowned our kids, and our debt exploded. You said nothing. He held up a thick folder. This is a 25-year trail of corruption, misused funds, broken promises. You got rich while Americans lost everything, and you dare call President Trump a failure? Schumer's face went pale. His smirk vanished. J.D. wasn't bluffing. Vance faced the press. While Schumer speaks of ethics, he greenlit contracts for donors and helped bury reports showing billions wasted under Biden, and never once criticized them, not once. The silence in the room was deafening. I watched my hometown collapse, Vance said. While people like you smiled in D.C., you called Trump a bully. But you, Senator, are a polished snake, and today I'm cutting the head off those lies. Vance opened the folder again. These are government records, not theories. Chuck Schumer received over $24 million from shell organizations, used campaign funds for Hamptons vacations, private jets, and donor dinners more expensive than a mortgage. Cameras clicked rapidly. Reporters exchanged stunned looks. JD's voice cracked with emotion. You mock Trump for bringing jobs back, for cutting inflation, for growing GDP, but that's not a lie. That's hope returning to people who'd given up. A woman in the front row wiped away tears. You call it a mirage? JD asked. Then you've never walked in our shoes. He raised another document. $3.1 million labeled community investments that never existed. Where did that money go, Senator? Schumer tried to speak, but JD pressed on. You let Biden use an auto pen to sign international deals while pretending it was normal. You weren't protecting democracy. You were protecting your donors. A tear slipped from JD's eye. You let America bleed while you lived like a king. Across the nation, truckers pulled over, seniors wept, and business owners watched in silence. This wasn't a press conference anymore. This was a reckoning. Vance held up his vice presidential pin. I don't serve for power. I serve the people. I remember being poor, angry, invisible, and I won't let elites like you erase our pain with polished speeches. A reporter asked, Are you accusing Senator Schumer of criminal fraud? JD answered, I'm accusing him of betraying the American people. He flipped open another report. $8 million diverted to private firms tied to his PAC. That's not slander. That's theft. He looked back at Schumer. You call Trump a failure? What do you call 300,000 new jobs, gas below $2, and inflation cut in half? That's not failure. That's leadership, Schumer muttered. This is political theater. JD replied, Tell that to the vet who finally got his check. Tell it to the father who finally fed his kids. He raised one last document. $8 million for infrastructure in New York that never materialized. Want to explain that, Senator? Schumer stood frozen. JD leaned forward. You want impeachment? Then maybe it's time we start with the ones who betrayed us the longest. Reporters looked stunned. Some teared up. My mom cried when her factory closed, JD said. She waited 10 years for someone to care. It wasn't you. He stepped back. No dramatics, just truth. Within hours, the fallout began. Hashtags like Now Schumer Exposed and JD Truth Storm lit up the internet. Newsrooms flooded with calls. Even Democrats whispered, maybe it's time we listened. In rural Kentucky, a veteran watched the replay. I waited my whole life for someone to say that, he whispered. JD later called his wife. I think I went too far. She answered, No, JD, you went exactly far enough. That same day, a Senate leak confirmed everything. Memos, transfers, Schumer's corruption now undeniable. At a quiet follow-up, JD said, I didn't expose him to destroy a man. I exposed him because too many good people have been destroyed by this system. Reporters nodded. Even skeptics fell silent. JD ended with this. Government is service, not royalty. And the people are done being ignored. The nation wasn't just listening, it was waking up. And JD Vance wasn't done fighting.